I just like threw up my hands in the air, just like, please, please, please help me. Is there anyone out there?
A dire diagnosis.
And finally, they found the cancer. And intuitively, I knew something was wrong with me. I just knew it.
Awakened her spirit.
And all of a sudden, people came into my life to help me.
Now author and intuitive healer Michelle Hill is sharing her light and her story with us.
I was having a spiritual awakening. It's like, warning, you're going to have to mourn your old self.
How do we embrace our new self?
You start to feel better.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers.
This is Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am really excited to reconnect. It's been quite a few years since we've seen each other, worked with each other a little bit. We had a mentor in common. And I even remember you came over to my house one of my very first breathwork sessions as I was trying to get my bearings with it. So it was really exciting for you to be one of my guinea pigs trying to do that. Poor thing. I remember you kind of like shaking, like, what's going on? I'm like holding your hand.
It was intense. It was intense.
Really, really intense. And that was my first time leading it. So I was kind of like, oh my goodness, what's going on? But,
right.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today.
Thank you. And, yeah, I loved that experience because I didn't know what was happening, but I just trusted and I knew that a lot of deep stuff was coming out. So breathwork is super important.
Oh my goodness. I feel like I've had some of my biggest awakenings during breathwork when I went through training. It really opened me up to some childhood stuff that I don't think I even realized. And I don't even think I've fully explored at this point. But you obviously had a big experience, and I know you've had a big spiritual awakening. And let's start there because I feel like we have a lot to talk about between plant medicine, your book, your twin, like we were talking about previously. And so the whole concept of finding your authentic self and your own identity, I think you will be able to bring a unique perspective to. But let's start with you. Let's start with your awakening, how you found your way to yourself and through your soul.
And it's an ongoing process, as you know.
It is. Yes.
Still going there. But
exactly.
In 2012, and I think a lot of people experience this. And by the way, I'm getting chills. Like that's my validation. So I might keep saying, I'm getting the chills. In 2012, a lot of people went through their awakenings. It just was the time period. The stars aligned. And for me, that was thyroid cancer. And before that, I was just sailing through life, you know, and in my book, I say I was sailing with a captain, Captain Morgan, right? Drinking too much, really just living from an unconscious perspective, I would call it. And that's not bad, right? And some people are just meant to stay there. But for me, I was meant to become a more conscious being and connect with my divine soul, which I didn't even know was really there. Sure, I would pray once in a while, but I had no idea what was going to hit me or coming in the future, right? So, in 2012, I just started feeling sick and I went to multiple doctors. And finally, they found the cancer. And intuitively, I knew something was wrong with me. I just knew it. My husband was like, you're a hypochondriac. I'm like, no, I just know it. Like the soul knew it. And so finally, the soul was like screaming at me. And I was able to, go through that process. And after that, really, my body was thrown out of balance. Okay. Living without a thyroid, it touches every cell in the body.
Okay.
So I just was thrown out of balance, like hormones, sleep, all of this, right? The life that I knew before was completely done. No, you can't drink alcohol like you used to. You can't go to all these parties, and I was the first one out of my group. So I did have to go through a mourning process and a grieving process of the old self that I once knew, which is my, I guess, ego self, right?
Right.
And transition into really tapping into my soul. And when I was going through all of these physical and emotional and mental symptoms and spiritual, looking back, one night I just laid there and prayed, just please someone help me. Please someone help me. I want to heal, and then I will help heal others. And that's what I said. And all of a sudden, and I'm getting full body chills, people came into my life to help me. And that one of them was our mentor, right? And then I became attuned to Reiki, and that just opened up my intuitive gifts. I was laying there one night reading like Google, how do you open your third eye? And it said, just imagine a light just like beaming out of your eye, your third eye. And I was like, oh, that sounds easy enough. And this was after being attuned. And the whole night, my third eye was pulsating. And I was like, this stuff is actually real? Oh my God, I can't believe it. This is my dream. I wanted to be that intuitive being. And little did I know, I didn't know that back then. And this was making me really excited. And I wanted to learn more and more and more about all of this. And then I started getting, the clairs started opening up, right? And so you're starting to see things. You think it's your imagination, but then you start to understand that, no, these are your gifts. And so a mentor told me I'm going to be practicing Reiki on others. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. That's just not for me. Of course, I started to do that. And then just practicing on others and performing on myself, the Reiki helped me to start balancing my physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. I was allowing that spiritual side of me to come out. So looking back, not only was I having a physical crisis with my thyroid cancer, I was having a spiritual awakening. And I didn't know it at the same time. So it coincided.
Well, I think that happens a lot. I think we usually are pushed into it. I think some of us come in like wanting to learn and wanting to know more, but a lot of the times I think, something happens in our life. You always hear about like near-death experiences or getting sick or something that just changes your whole mindset about it. But you did say something that I have found lately. Now, I haven't grown up extremely religious. I didn't come from a family where we went to church or practiced religion. I believed in God. My family believed in God. I always believed in something bigger. But I have found lately, and this is something I'm exploring, believing in something bigger, having faith in something more is huge when it comes to really finding your way in life, stepping into who you are, finding any sort of success. But you took it one step further, which I have lately. It's literally probably been in the last couple of weeks with praying. I still, my daughter goes to a Christian preschool. I moved to the South. I live in Tennessee now. It is there's a church on every corner, so it is very religious, but we're still not like church goers. My husband and I strongly believe in it. But I have literally prayed lately, and it used to just be me talking, but the action, the intention of prayer, I think is extremely powerful. And it's something I am just starting to explore. I have seen each time I have prayed, and this has been a handful of times, maybe 4 or 5 times in the last couple of weeks, things immediately change or things immediately happen. It kind of sounds like that happened for you.
And it's funny that you're bringing that up because I don't necessarily pray anymore. So now I'm thinking I got to start doing it. Of course, I do other sacred types of practices, but really, I think making that connection and that sacred time, whether you're putting your hands together or just sitting in meditation is super important to make that connection to yourself, to your guides, angels, whatever you resonate with, source, whatever it is. And I was raised Catholic. My mom actually almost became a Catholic nun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and the program just stopped, so she could no longer continue, but thank God. So, yeah, I was raised Catholic, and I think back then I didn't know anything else, so I just would kind of go through the same routine, please help me. But during that time, I really was struggling a lot and desperate. And I just like threw up my hands in the air, just like, please, please, please help me. Is there anyone out there or anything? Right. And so I do believe that if people are going through this process, which they are, a lot of them right now, the planet is going through a shift and we're expanding in consciousness. And it's very difficult for some people, but it's really relenting and surrendering and asking for guidance with whatever you resonate with.
Why do you think now? This is another topic that keeps coming up, is the expanding of consciousness right now, that we are really going through that. I've talked a lot about it as being more connecting to the divine feminine coming in, kind of losing that patriarchy that we've really kind of found ourselves in over the last couple of decades, and this shift into consciousness and a higher awakening. And I don't know if it necessarily, I know when you're saying in 2012, it kind of started because, that's probably when we were both in that program together. But now, I feel like a lot has also started once COVID happened, once the pandemic happened. We were all left with a lot of time alone, a lot of time to go within, a lot of time to think. And now, a couple of years out of that, you really see spirituality is talked about more, consciousness is talked about more. We are open to these conversations more. In your opinion, why do you think that is?
I think we go through cycles on planet Earth. And this is just the time period, the time frame that we're going through this. And we kind of ebb and flow, right? And this is the time, my husband and I were talking about this, like the 1950s, they were so great, right? The roaring 50, so much fun. Don't have to worry about expanding your consciousness so much.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about shedding all the lifetimes of trauma you've had in the past.
No.
They weren't thinking about that.
No.
It just wasn't the time period. And if you look at astrologically, I do believe like this is that transitional period that we're in. And we've gone through the cycles is what I'm getting on the planet. And this is the time. So, and we could talk later about it, but I've really been diving into ancient Egypt and Atlantis. And those were time periods where this was also happening. And it's almost like we are mirroring those time periods. And we can bring back, and of course I'm getting the chills, we can bring back gifts from those lifetimes. We can bring back the technology that they had with crystals and all sorts of things, the Egyptians. And that's part of what I'm really diving into. And I'm going to Egypt in November, is that aspect of, wow, right, this does, if you study those ancient lands and time period, we are mirroring that. And we don't want the destruction to happen like it did. This time we're going to get it right. And this time we're going to prevail, I guess the word is.
So what do you think we need to do differently from then?
So more and more people are waking up and the veil is thinner. And what I've channeled is because the collective is expanding in consciousness, then we're able to access these things greater and faster. And it's just, I believe, a matter of this collective consciousness. And so it depends on the individual, right? We can't really necessarily focus on anyone else but yourself and see how you can get into your heart space out of your egoic mind and get back into your soul. And that looks different for everybody, but then that helps us to elevate the consciousness of the planet. And we can reach those states of being that are accessible that people don't even realize.
So like, what are tips? I mean, if you are trying to expand your consciousness or your awareness or connect on that level, I mean, you said you were reading and went to mentorships and things like that, but how can we do that because it's different for everyone. We all need to tap in. And like you said, you opened yourself to all these gifts. We all have them. It's not like anyone is special or unique. We all have these gifts. So how do we get out of that ego and connect to our heart? How do we connect to who we are on a soul level? That's what it really comes down to, is understanding who you are on an inner level and not what the outside world or your ego is telling you. So how do we do that?
Right. And that's what I write about in my book, is awakening out of the ego and into the soul. And I have two characters here. My ego is CC. I named her. And then Citrine is my higher self, and they just kind of banter back and forth. I like
that's
to
not you and your that's not you and your sister, right? That's you. Yeah.
Yeah. People will think it's my twin sister.
Yeah.
And maybe this ego can represent her. Let's be honest. She would say the same thing. She would say the same thing.
Oh my goodness.
But I use these characters to help portray, because sometimes it could be difficult to grasp these large concepts. And so if someone's just starting out and they're just feeling physically ill, not understanding what's happening, and they are drawn to this type of work and might catch a podcast here or there or catch a glimpse of a book, and they might want to pick it up because I make it very tangible. I offer practical ways, and you can I teach how to kind of use a pendulum or practice how to start connecting and asking questions. Is this coming from my ego, or is this coming from a higher place? And you can use a pendulum to start practicing with that. And because I get that question all the time, how do I know it's my ego or my higher self? And there's different techniques, right? If someone asks you a quick question, just put your hand on your heart, and the first answer typically is your higher self. When we sit with things, when we let the fears come in, that's when the ego tends to creep in, right? So I do provide meditations at the end of each chapter, and I think meditating is important. That was important for me on this journey. And just by touching this book, I've set the intention that people are they're going to shift. So just by grasping it or reading it, you're already receiving my intention for them to receive. It's almost like they're sending a signal that they're ready by embracing a book like this or another book or a podcast. And it's sending out signals that you're willing and you're ready. And that resonance will start to bring in the others and the other information that you need in the moment, because everyone's on their journey in different times. So that's why I say, I don't talk about Egypt in here. I do not talk about light language, nothing like that. I want to keep it very simple. And I talk about how your identity is ego, how a lot of us are identifying with certain groups or ways of being, and that could be old programming or past lives that are, interfering. And so it's important. The ego kind of houses those things. And we don't want to necessarily get rid of the ego altogether, but we want to turn down the dial of the ego station and crank up the higher self station, just like crank, so that we have this higher perspective and more clarity and about the path that you're supposed to be on. And that could just be anything. That could just be giving a smile to someone in the grocery line, right? And it doesn't have to be this huge process. My husband, he's gone on this process with me. I write about it in the book. At first, he had no idea what I was talking about. I was like, I have this feeling. I need to do this work. Like, it's just calling to me. And he's like, what are you talking about? Right. And so slowly but surely over the years, it's almost like, I think I did set an example for him, but he doesn't talk to galactic beings like I do. He'll go take the dogs for a walk in the morning and he will just check his ego, and he'll maybe read something, and then we'll come back and we'll sit and talk about the ego, and he just does it in a different way. So trust me, in the beginning, I was spiritually bypassing him, saying, well, thinking you're better, because on this journey, you're going to think you're better than everyone else in the beginning. And that's total ego. And I write about it in the book, and it makes me cringe and laugh at the same time. Like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm connecting with these great things, and you should be doing it too. And so, nah. I've learned that everyone is going at their own pace, and that no one is better than anyone else. And if people are not pursuing this journey that they're not meant to, they might be here to experience polarity or the shadow aspects of themselves. So we have to always remember that as well. And they might be there to reflect and mirror to you so you can grow. And in this lifetime, they decided, no, that's not for me. Maybe the next one, right?
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that, because that came up with another conversation I've had recently, because it's kind of like this whole concept, like, no, we all need to become aware or expand our consciousness at the same time. And I almost got a little bit checked, like, no. Like, if someone's not willing to go there, it's not that they're not willing. Maybe that's not their path. And so it made me think a little bit, because in my mind, the way it's been taught to me is like, we are all here to grow and expand and ascend in our soul journey. And so I've kind of latched onto that idea, but this is new, that, maybe some people aren't. Maybe they are here to either help you in your journey by not doing that, by mirroring something, but the people that are going to be on it with you are going to come along, like your husband. My husband's the same thing. He didn't know anything about this when we first met. It was a girlfriend of mine wanted to practice mediumship, and he had unfortunately lost one of his best friends a couple months before, and there was no connection to them at all. So I said, here's here, practice on us. And we got that reading, and my husband always believed in something. He was a big manifester, big vision board, very big into that motivational space, to believe it, but it was kind of more not on the spiritual side. And once he had that reading, he was like, it was so accurate, so right on. He was crying, had chills. It was just kind of like, I'm all in. Like, it was just like, one little thing happens and he's all in. And it's like, since then we've been on this journey together. So it's really great when we can find like-minded people to do this with, to help us ascend. But that's not always going to be the case with people in our lives. Is your sister now, so let's talk about like the whole finding your autonomy and who you truly are. Now, as a twin, you have that uniqueness that you come from one, and you guys are identical. So is she on this journey with you, or are you guys mirroring each other?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were, and I tell this story in my book about how she was a surprise on the delivery table. It was just crazy. But and in fact, when I did a regression in the womb, I realized that because she was a surprise and I came out first, I was scared. I didn't know, where is she? She's still in there. They didn't know.
Oh.
I thought I lost her. And so it's almost, I wrote this in my journal. I said, at that point, I promised myself I would never let her go out of my sight. And that created this huge codependency between us. And I didn't know why. And so doing regressions are very, or going back into the womb of your mother, are very important, because it gives you these realizations and then awareness, and then you can bring it up and to the surface, right? But we were inseparable our whole lives, pretty much. We even dated twins. I think twins just attract twins. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't think that's uncommon.
It's strange. I have a lot of friends that are twins, or people that have twins. So
that's funny.
Anyway. Yeah. And so we were inseparable. We went to college together, everything. And then, gosh, when I was going through my health crisis, she was going through a divorce. And so those were our pivotal wake up moments, right? But we didn't know how to navigate them together. And it forced us to start becoming more independent, right? And we were playing victim with each other, like codependency does. Why don't you think that this is a horrible thing? Like, I'm going through cancer. Yeah, well, I'm going through divorce, right? So you're like comparing, and we never fought. We just didn't fight that much before. And then she also had struggled with addiction. And she's now 2 years sober, which is great. So now she's helping others along their path. And gosh, when I was going through it, it was the hardest thing of my life, because there was a point in time where we didn't even speak. And I had to grieve her like a death. I really, really did. I never thought we'd come back together like this. And I'm so thankful that we have. But she's the one that was attuned first to Reiki.
Okay.
But never started practicing it. She's very talented, but she doesn't trust her gifts even to this day. She'll tell me something and I say, okay, thank you. You just channeled that message for me, right?
Yeah.
But I think her mission and purpose is to really guide others through their sobriety and utilize her gifts and breath work and all of that, gather people in community to help them, because it's really this expanding consciousness. These different tools are not readily available in that world yet. So that's what she wants to do. So we have come back together, but I write about the identity in my book and the loss of identity being a twin, because people always compare you, or, I tell parents of twins, try not to dress them the same. They need to develop their own identity. But we were so tight that it was difficult. And so as Eckhart Tolle says, the ego is, identity is the ego. So we're trying to get out of that perspective. And really, it was so beneficial for us to gain this independence and our own, I don't want to say identity because that's linked to ego, but our own consciousness and way of being, really.
Well, do you think individuating, because I think in my experience, individuating yourself from your family or your group or wherever you belong goes hand in hand with developing your intuition. It's kind of like individuation and intuition kind of work together, because you have to almost get out of that group think. You have to get out of that outside perspective. Even it doesn't even have to be a twin. Like, I have a sister, and there, sometimes you separate a bit when you have to grow, as opposed to being compared with one another. You have 2 daughters. I'm sure you see it. They're not that far apart in age, I don't believe. So, you probably see that a little bit, and it is hard, whether you're a twin or a sibling, you are going to have that comparison, especially if you're both girls or both boys. So it almost sounds like, any sort of individuation will help you tap into your intuition so that you can almost think for yourself. It doesn't mean you can't be part of the group, but you have to be willing to stand on your own. And that's hard. That's scary from time to time.
It's so scary coming from a family of codependents.
Yes.
And yes, I do. It's interesting that you're saying that, because even though earlier I was talking about this group consciousness.
Right.
And then remember, I pulled it back to, no, it's your individual that's going to lend to the group. So the more we work on ourselves as individuals and not identify with these groups that are like political, whatever it is, right? It's that is the ego. And we're trying to get back to, okay, really connect within. What does your higher self say? If someone's like, well, who are you going to vote for or whatever? I'm not Democrat, I'm not Republican. I am whatever my intuition says about that person, or, we just have to really be able to, and everyone's unique, right?
Yeah.
Someone's going to resonate with something, and some people need to be a part of potentially a group dynamic in order to receive that mirror reflecting back. And yeah.
But it's interesting because we do talk about this. We talk about we all come from source, whatever universe, God, spark, whatever term you want to choose to call it. We all come from there. We talk about a oneness and a unity, but now we are still go into this concept of we have to do it on the self. We have to be individual. How do these two things, and this is obviously something I'm kind of struggling with. How do we all contribute to the one and the unity and source that we all are a part of, but we have to do it on an individual level? And how do we become ourselves in that, separate from the one?
Right. That's very interesting. I think, again, just going back to the more you elevate in consciousness or expand, it's going to trickle out to others inevitably. And it's going to connect with that oneness that we all know from being in that other dimension, whatever you want to call it. So we all know it, but we did also come down here to have these experiences.
You just said something interesting, connect. Maybe that's what the oneness is. Maybe that's the unity. Individually, we have to be who we are, but raising our consciousness and stepping into this existence, we can connect with others. Is that maybe where it is?
Yes, I think so, for sure. It's tricky, and like I said, I feel like we did come here to have these experiences as well. But deep down inside, it's a matter of coming back to just honoring the fact that we are coming from the same source, oneness, right? And however, I do feel like we have to play out the individual aspects of ourselves in order to get to that oneness, if that makes sense. I think I just channeled that. I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
So it's important to take the individual aspects in order to then connect with the whole.
Well, I'm feeling, even if we are all coming down from one source, like source wants to have all these different individual experiences to be whole itself. So we all have to experience that for source, which that is kind of one of the concepts I've talked about is, or I talked about this with a guest quite a few months ago, is like, you can't just embrace one part of yourself. You have to embrace your whole self. Don't be your best self, be your whole self, which is the good, the bad, and the ugly, which now that we're talking about it kind of makes sense coming from source. So source wants to embrace its full self. It has to embrace all these different individual aspects. And we are just living, breathing humans giving source access to these different parts of self. Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of working through this puzzle right now as we're speaking.
No, I like how you said that a lot.
Interesting.
It's a crazy concept. All these concepts are crazy, right? But you can really they just start to come to you, and the clarity is greater. The perspective is different when you can tap into that aspect of yourself that is all-knowing, is part of source. And we are receiving, I don't know if you want me to talk about light language, but...
Yes, definitely.
So light language is a vibrational expression that I use during my healings. Never thought in a million years I'd be doing that. Right?
I don't know much about it, so tell me all about it.
There's different forms and ways of expressing light language. So what it is, it's basically bringing in these fractals of light and information. And this can be, to me, I feel like right now when I'm doing healings, it's literally bringing in information from ancient Egypt, for example. And this information goes to your soul. And I think that the light language is at such a frequency that your ego can't even bother with it. Some people smirk or laugh when they first hear it because it's so kind of out there. But I think it's on purpose so that your egoic mind can't get in the way and your soul's like, oh, yeah, girl, I remember that. Like that's my language. That's the language of the soul, right?
Yeah.
And it's encoded. And we've come down here encoded. Mm-hmm. And so living from that egoic state, we're not able to access what is within us, these codes, if you will. And I call it a soul code now. Like we each have a soul code or a blueprint. Mm-hmm. And we are able to, as you start to shed the layers of trauma and all of that, we're able to access these codes, and the light language helps to activate them. So for example, I'll just be in a session and you can set an intention with it because it carries a frequency. So maybe we're talking about ancient Egypt, and the person was a high priestess back then, and they had beautiful intuitive gifts that they haven't realized yet. So then I go ahead and channel the light language, and that intention is to activate those gifts. So it does many things. It can alter DNA and restructure many things in your body and get to the trauma that is hidden. So I always say it's whatever the recipient needs in that moment, but it's just carrying these fractals of light and this frequency that is now accessible. And you'll hear more and more people using it. I don't know if you see that painting.
Yeah.
But my friend did that for me, and that is essentially light language. So you can draw it, you can sing it, hum it, you could use like hand gestures. So
where do you learn it?
I feel like it's within us, especially people who are attracted to my work. 100%. And I'm like, okay, I feel like you are a starseed. You come from other cosmic dimensions in other lifetimes. And this is within you. And so I could set the intention and say, hey, let's activate your light language. When mine was activated, I went to a healing, and the woman didn't even tell me that she was going to express this. I was just laying there, and all of a sudden I hear these weird noises. And I'm like, okay, what is she doing? She never even explained it, really. I feel like at that moment is when I was activated.
So is it something, do you hear it as, you said you were hearing noises. So is that what it is for you? Do you like hear different noises, or is it like, do you hear it like you would hear a channeled message where it's actually words, but it feels different?
So I'll speak some right now. So it's hasato anaya kana osata asho uraya to onaya karato otaya to resi ataya shoshi hiona kana tai otonaya sa. So yeah, right?
So it's a full-on language. It's
yes.
Okay,
and
wow.
Everyone sounds or it can sound different for different people. Sometimes I'll be really fast, or I went to this retreat in Tennessee, and the leader, she's a pretty well-known light language practitioner. She was blue avian. I'm not sure if you know much about star seeds, but
no,
that's a type of star seed, seeded from the stars, different planetary systems. Star seeds have been in these other planetary systems in other lifetimes and have this cosmic knowledge. And so, and I've channeled that we all have the DNA of like a star seed, but not everyone is going to awaken that in this lifetime. It's almost like the DNA is within us. And if people come to me, I'm activating that DNA for them. So blue avian is a type of star seed. There's Pleiadian, Arcturian, there's many different types. And she was like, sounded like a bird.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't want to sound like that. Like, please. And that, she was totally fine with it. My guides know I don't want to sound like a bird. So they're giving me something else.
So what did you just say? Do you know what you just said?
Well, to me, I was working on your heart chakra. And
okay.
Yeah, so that's just what I felt. And sometimes I'll channel what it means. But really, I don't think you can translate it. I will say things like, working on your heart chakra or the inner child or blah, 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 blah. But it's not like word for word, for me at least. And so the recipient can feel, sometimes they start to tear up. Sometimes they don't feel anything at first because it's just working through the layers. And sometimes as we go further along, when they're more open to receiving this light and their dense carbon bodies are shifting, because that's essentially what we're doing. We're bringing in this light technology to bring higher frequency into your being.
Yeah.
Some people like jerk, or because it's I can tell that it's actually coming through to them in a powerful way.
Wow.
So it's very interesting. And again, like if I were in a bar in college and someone yelled across the room, "You're going to speak light language," in like 25 years, I'd be like, "What? Drink my beer." Right?
Oh my
No
goodness.
way. At first I didn't even want to do it because I was embarrassed. And now I just surrender, which you have to do with this process.
Mm-hmm. I find that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of surrendering and there's a lot of just letting go of caring about how someone else is going to perceive you or think. I kind of want to go back though to the whole concept of your body, because when you were saying that to me, I do, and that makes sense that you said you were working on my heart chakra. I feel like a little warmness.
Okay,
right here.
yeah.
So
Perfect.
that would make sense to me that you went there. But our body, so your body is really what led you on this path to awakening and to your ascension and to learning all of this stuff. And you said you have to go through lots of doctors to figure it out. We were talking briefly about this, that you suffer with anxiety, just like I do, and panic attacks and things like that. And your former career was in pharmaceuticals, which I think is crazy to me. Well, not crazy, but you learned all of that there. And then now all of a sudden you're here, you're working in plant medicine, you're working in holistic healings and things like that. It's such a far departure. Why do you think we are going more in that direction? Even another thing you said is how we're all like trying to heal these traumas and things now. I think that's part of also the mass conscious awakening that's happening, because, you know, you can't turn on social media without seeing people talk about childhood trauma or generational trauma, or how you parent, how we need to parent different than we were raised. And I'm sure every group of parents is told to parent differently than their parents did in some way, or shape or form. But there's a lot of talk about trauma, healing your inner child, generational traumas. So this work is really kind of at the forefront of healing in general and conscious awakening, going into this more holistic field. So why do you think that is? Where is that coming from? And what has been your experience coming from like the Western medicine world that's pushing pills into this world that's, you know, a lot more holistic?
Sure. Well, these holistic ways, many of them have been around forever, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We just got away from them. And luckily I was guided in that direction as I was working pharmaceutical sales.
Yeah.
And let me preface by saying, a lot of people have a negative view about pharmaceutical companies, and I can see that in terms of maybe from very high levels, but from my experience personally, I had an amazing time and career, and I met my husband there, and my sister worked there. So it was a really good experience for me. But as I continued along this journey and expanded my consciousness, I started to get really tired when I would walk into the office. It was heavier energy for me. It was more dense. And as I started to open up to holistic ways of healing, because I probably was a medicine woman in a past life, it just lit me on fire. I just wanted to share this with the world. You know, homeopathy, plant medicine, all the different ways that I've used to help me heal. Wanted to shout from the rooftops. And so I was just in this dichotomy of, oh my gosh, you know, that world did keep me grounded, I would say, because in this other world, you can get a little, let me just always be in this state of higher consciousness. But sometimes you just want to grab some French fries and, you know, just be in your ego, be in your human self, and which is not a bad thing. But as I shifted, I just could no longer, I knew that it was time. And I would do my spiritual work on the weekends and then go to the doctor's offices during the day. And I feel like, again, the information that I was talking about that we're receiving when we do go on this journey is, oh, I used to use plants when I was in this other lifetime to heal my body. I remember that. Wow. Okay. And it's not probably like a conscious thing. You subconsciously, you're like, your body, your soul is like, I remember that. I need that, not the other thing. And some people need pharmaceuticals. I get it. But the more you elevate or change and shift in frequency, I believe we need these products that carry a higher frequency. And that's what I found. Even like with supplements, I'll use my pendulum and test, and I won't need certain supplements anymore as I shift, because maybe they're not resonating with me anymore. So if you're starting on this journey and you're having pharmaceuticals, that's fine, right? But maybe you'll find yourself switching to other things, and that'll switch too, potentially down the line. So for me, homeopathy was a big help, like 7 years ago. Changed my life. I still love homeopathy. But I found myself, when plant medicine was introduced to me recently, about a year ago, oh my goodness. And it's CBD, right? It's hemp. People think it's marijuana, but the hemp plant and the marijuana plant are, just think of them as distant cousins. So hemp is very different, right? We've used it for many, many years with clothing and everything. And they finally passed the Farm Bill in 2018 to make it legal in all states. So I've tried CBD in the past when I was on the journey, right? But guess what? Number one is what I'm getting right now. Maybe it wasn't in alignment with me. So I still felt like a reaction from it. Number two, maybe it wasn't super clean. You have to make sure it's certified organic and all of that. So yeah, it's going to change and shift. And this plant medicine that I've been introduced to carries a super high vibrational frequency. And I feel like Mother Earth is bringing it back to us. And it brought it back to me. And speaking of the anxiety, I mean, it has, I'm getting full body chills. Completely changed my world in terms of panic attacks and anxiety. Completely changed my world. So.
Well, do you think as an intuitive, you're obviously an empath as well. Do you think that makes you have heightened anxiety? And do you think the ways that we try to deal with that now with Western medicine, with pharmaceuticals, with drugs or alcohol, whatever it may be, do you think that dampens down our intuitive skills? Do you think that numbs them so that we can't touch? Because I will even find the more and more I get into the work, the less and less I decide to have my glass of wine at night. I used to be I love wine. I could drink a bottle of wine by myself, just love it, love it, love it. And now it's just kind of like on occasion, at a dinner, I'll have a glass of wine. And it wasn't, I think I had a problem when I was younger. I haven't had a problem for a while. And so it's not any reason like that. It's just, I don't find the pull to it anymore. And even now for me is like, I want to be off of my anti-anxiety medication. It's a very low dose SSRI. I know it's great. It helps me stop my thoughts. It helps me stop my rumination. But, there's part of me that's like, is this numbing out my gifts? I know they're still there and I know I can connect, but what if I wasn't on them? Like, what could I really do? Do you find some of that?
100%. I'll give you some examples. My sister, she is on an SSRI, but she was able to lower the dose by taking the plant medicine that was introduced to me. And she does feel like eventually she can wean off of it. I do believe it just a dense vibration that at one point your body could resonate with. But when you go on this journey, again, your body just can't tolerate things. If I drink alcohol, my eyes pus. So I haven't had a drink in like 2 or 3 years. I don't know which year it is, but my guides are like, no, you're not having alcohol, because I too thought at one point I'm drinking a little too much. So another example, I had breast implants and I had them for like 7, maybe 10 years. One day, and I knew it intuitively. I was like, this is not helping my body. It's dense. It's bringing it down. I got them out. And so I feel like you're just going to, it's the resonance isn't there anymore. And some people can still handle it. You know, it's like someone who could smoke a pack a day. But I don't think they're expanding their consciousness, but that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. Maybe they chose to, hey, I want to live the life, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
But from my personal experience and from people I know, it's just not in resonance. So,
I mean, there really is a mind, body, soul connection. Like you have to take care of your body to really be able to connect on that spiritual level, on that soul level, because it is the vessel for it all. And whether it's through plant medicine or cleaning up any sort of nature of your energy, it's your energetic field the more you clean that up, the more you will allow in. Even like I said, like I was telling you how my husband had his, moment where he was just like, okay, this is real. It was not that long afterwards. He quit drinking. He did a challenge, 75 hard. It wasn't because he had a problem. He did this like endurance, like challenge where it's like no alcohol, reading, water, exercise twice a day, this whole thing. And it was over 75 days. And he was so committed to it. And he felt so good when that was done. He just said, I don't think I ever want to go back to it. And it's been almost 2 years. No, it's been over 2 years now. He hasn't had a drink since. He just doesn't want to. He doesn't want to numb himself out. It's like his soul said, nope, you don't need it anymore. So, and I am finding that with the more intuitive people I talk to, the more people who are, and it's not even more intuitive because a lot of us are intuitive and don't even realize it. The more that we are consciously aware of our spirit and the gifts and all that stuff, it seems to like kind of take a back seat.
Yeah, it kind of just, your body is in that heightened vibration. Your cells are vibrating. You have more light. It just does not, you're going to feel like crap if you drink. You're going to, I still have my fries and stuff like that, but I have to really watch, when I'm putting my body, like I want green juices, I crave it. So yeah, it's very unique and people are not really aware of that when they start this awakening journey. It's like, warning, you're going to have to mourn your old self, which is an amazing thing, right? You're going to have more energy and clarity and stamina. But yeah, and the people, people who are stuck in those cycles and addiction and all of that, like for my sister, it's almost like, so the addiction like caused the depression. It was like a vicious cycle. So now she's out of it and she's going to breathwork and she's doing things. She can now see that was all interrelated, right? But she does need the support of something like a plant medicine to help her during her recovery and, wean off of those medications that are no longer in alignment. So
how do we mourn that old self? Like, how do we embrace our new self and let go of that old self?
Let a crying. Well, you start to feel better and you start to understand that, wow, things are coming into my life that are more positive. Right. And so it's showing you what this type of world can be like. Living from your soul's perspective. And that allows, I think, for the grief to process and come up and come through and just allowing it to, you're going to lose friends. You're going to lose relationships. I'm talking recently, it's very quick, very quick. It depends on where you are on your journey. But I found, wow, I only have to be in this opportunity for a couple months and I've already learned the lesson so I can move on to the other one. Or, I I had to be in a 10-year marriage to learn codependency, but now maybe they're going to show it to me in like a 4-month relationship, and then I can move on and really find that one. So I think it's really cool, but it's shocking to our system as humans that it's happening so quickly, very quick.
But what if it is like you're losing someone? I mean, what if it's your like people in your family or a best friend or someone you've grown up with, or like you said, a husband or a relationship? I mean, some of these things are hard, and it's really hard to awaken and allow yourself to transform when people don't want to see you as this new version of you. So how do you deal with that scenario?
I've lost a best friend. My relationship struggled. Thankfully, we're on the same page now. But it's the people who are in resonance that are going to come in, that are going to replace them, that are in your highest alignment. And it's grief, of course, that you have to go through. And you never know, they could see you as this role model, or, they see how you're shifting and changing, and they say, oh, wow, maybe I want to start doing that. And maybe they'll come back around. You don't know, but it's interesting. My sister was talking about this because being a parent is difficult when your kids are in the human. Okay. I mean, both of my children are intuitive, but one of them is very sensitive, has sensory issues, all of that. Right. But she wants to be in the human, but I give her the plant medicine. And I'm like, oh my God, am I raising her vibration too high where she's not going to be able to function in this world? Right. So I'm like, here, have some sugar. Like we got to balance it out. But it is a time period also where these children are very high vibrational beings, and it's hard for them and hard for teenagers. And there's tons of anxiety and depression because they don't realize that there's these beings of light that came in this time period to go through this. And I feel bad for them almost because they're doing it at a way younger age than I did. Thank God I was able to party my ass off and, go through the human experience. And so I do want them to have that experience too. But when you're meditating and you're in this higher consciousness state and your kids are like not appreciative of something, and you're thinking of like the people who are suffering, and you're like, oh my God, how do I be a conscious parent with maybe some unconscious children? It's very difficult. My sister's like, what do I do? But, they provide the mirror, they provide the balance. So it's not an easy process or journey.
No, I think parenting, this whole idea of conscious parenting is very difficult. My kids are young, but even like you said, sensory issues, now that you're saying that, it's kind of ringing a bell with me because I think my daughter is extremely intuitive. She's such a great read of energy, but loud noises bother her. Like she really doesn't like to leave the house too much. Like she wants to know, she gets anxiety about being around big groups and things like that. And I think it's because she is such a high vibrational being and our kids come in very connected already. So we're the kind of the ones that sometimes turn that off of them. So, she's about to be 4. So she's still in that stage where she's really like consciously aware of everything. But I think that's interesting as parents to notice that in your kids when your kids are, sensory aware, things like that. It's probably because of their energetic state and their consciousness.
It is. And you asked about being an empath and the anxiety. And when I first had my first panic attack, I think it was a multitude of things, maybe hormones, but also the energetic taking on a lot of things. I always ask, my younger daughter is starting to have the panic and the anxiety. I know. And it kills me, right? It kills me. I don't want any kid to suffer. And so it's just like, oh my God, I can say, have you been cleansing your energy? Because you're going to school now and they don't realize they're so empathic and sensitive. And I do think like giving her the homeopathy or plant medicine will help to kind of balance it out because she's at that high vibration and maybe that jolt of dense energy is like making her nervous system shift or something.
Mm-hmm.
So with these types of beautiful, highly sensitive beings, I think looking into stuff like that, homeopathy, like for me, would never give her hardcore, not never, but like I always go holistic first with her. My older one,
Mm-hmm.
she could handle something like a medication.
Mm-hmm.
But I know intuitively that the younger one cannot. So
it's crazy. It's just crazy enough to like, just think about when you go through a panic attack or an anxiety attack. And I've only had a couple of them, and every time they've come, I've been able to work myself through it a little bit easier. The first time I had one, I felt like I had a week-long hangover. So I was like, what just happened? Like I had never had one before. And so the next time I'm like, okay, I think I know what's coming. I was able to take a bath and breathe through it and relax my nervous system and things like that. But a lot of times I think we get confused with things like a panic attack or an anxiety attack with our bodies raise in consciousness and the energy that's coming in. And so it can feel like you can feel disequalized a bit. And, imagine that on a child level. It's hard enough to, as an adult, as a 41-year-old woman, say, okay, this is what's happening. I might be raising my vibration or my consciousness or feeling another energy source. As a 4-year-old or a 14-year-old, I don't care. It's just that experience is going to be really hard to deal with. So the fact that like you have ways to help your daughter through it. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to raise kids that are energetically aware, that can understand their own feeling, that can understand their own aura, what they want to allow in and out of their life, and to support them as parents to do that. It's definitely adds a level, I think, to parenting that is new.
yes. And it just, something came up while you were talking about that. I think it's important for people to know that you can't rush into this process, because like you hear about people having their Kundalini awakenings and it's just so strong that they'll have reactions like that, like panic attacks, because your nervous system has to integrate it. So take it as slow as you need, right? If I'm doing a light language activation, I say, let's separate it by like 2 weeks or a month. We need to integrate it. So just take it slow, even if you're very excited about diving into this world. Yeah. I think it's important.
That's great advice. So if we want to work with you, learn from you, have our light language activated, how do we get in touch? Where do we get your book? All these good things.
Sure. My book is available on Amazon. It's called Wake Up Bitch, and there's an asterisk. And you can find me on Instagram at michelle.intuitive.healer. So michelle.intuitive.healer. And my website is www.michelle.hill.com. And just happy to connect. I do monthly activations online, and I'm starting to do one-on-one sessions again. And yeah, we'll see what the next book's going to be about.
I love it. Are you in the process of writing it?
I think, it's Egypt, I think, is going to activate me for sure. So I'm just waiting for the downloads.
Yeah. Well, even when you did a little bit of that light language, the way it sounds like from that region. That kind of sounds like a language from, not that I know anything about language from that area, but it kind of resonates. It sounds in my mind like that.
Yes. And it shifts too. So it's very interesting, but yeah. It's fun, and it's amazing.
I'm sure you have a past life there, obviously.
Oh yeah, I was a total bitch, Egyptian. I write about it in my book.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I will put all the information in the show notes, so hopefully people can get in touch with you. And I really appreciate talking with me and reconnecting again.
So fun to reconnect with you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Michelle Hill, for joining me in such a great conversation all about light language, something new that was really exciting to learn about, her book, and holistic health, also becoming an individual with a group conscious mindset, becoming one but still learning who you are on an authentic level and a real level. I think we had some great channeled information come through during this episode, something I've been struggling with to understand a little bit more. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to get in touch with Michelle, I'll put all the information of how to work with her in the show notes below. As always, you can find Intentional Media at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers lives, plus all of our books, new releases, and everything else we have going on. So thank you once again for listening and joining us, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.